conversation, that the responsibility falls back on me.
Well, it's not a question of advocating it from that aspect. We find ourselves in this 2019. We find ourselves with the Me Too movement controlling men, causing men to hold up and not do things. We find ourselves with the social media marketplace exposing men. Look at brothers like we talked about, Bishop Eddie Long, right now with R. Kelly. The exposure is causing a lot of men to retreat from leadership position. So many different things are focused on stripping men of their power, stripping men of their leadership attributes and responsibilities, and then the accountability piece. All of that is now by design by that enemy that we actually try to pretend is gone away, but he's more entrenched now, which we're talking about Satan. It's by design. He doesn't want a strong man. He doesn't want a man leading and taking that leadership position. So he's instituted situations that cause us to be unbalanced in our households and not live up to the responsibility of what manhood is all about.
One of the things, my brother, and I'm going to bring Benny to the mic so he can address on this, one of the things he's always consistently tells us in the National Men's Prayer Call is that our lives have to work for our leadership,
yes.
Right? That there's a role and responsibilities for us to get our acts together. And so we need to do that because people got to see it. It's called lifestyle ministry, right? It's lifestyle evangelism. That you can look in my life and see the fruit of my labor because I'm doing it right. And that's one of the things that for men earning this place, because before R. Kelly got exposed, before all these Me Too movements, men still were not stepping up into the roles of responsibility, the roles of leadership. We sat back and we let women who are more eager or who are more responsible to come in and say, I'll do that. Yes. So Benny, I want you to talk about that a little bit. If you know that,
well, that's good because there is a leadership void. And because there's a leadership void, there's a demand for leadership. And because there's a demand for leadership and men are not necessarily stepping up, women are stepping up in that space. And some of them are doing a hell of a job.
Yes, they are.
You know, and I'm so proud of the way the congressional races went. We have so many female judges. Some of them I'm a few real good friends with, and I voted for. I'm so proud of those ladies. They're stepping up where there is a void for men not stepping up, and that's why it's important for guys like us and to create our ministry, the National Men's Prayer Call, because it's about our ministry is leadership. Well, leadership is our ministry.
The core of it,
and so it's really about trying to help people understand how do you get more consistency out of your life? How do you get better on a day-to-day basis? What's the blueprint for doing that?
Because the misnomer is that you're not influencing somebody.
Right.
Not only being vocal and being present there, but even your absence of the vocals, absence of your presence there is in some forms negative leadership. You're sowing seeds that people are still watching. So for men, we're being very conscientious of what we do and how we position ourselves in our family dynamic, our church dynamic, in our jobs. And so across the board, we are saying that we must do our part.
Well, you have to remember one thing. If you have influence over anyone, whether it's a kid, whether it's your spouse, whoever you have influence over, that is leadership.
Exactly.
Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less.
Right.
And so we have to make sure we understand that. Now, do you have the right blueprint to help you understand what leadership is, how to make your life work? That's what people are looking for. People are looking for this map to help them be successful, to help them make better decisions. And now everybody, we're very vulnerable because you can get some nutcase on YouTube or any place else, Facebook, and put out some craziness. And you know, you get 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 or 30 or 100 people start following them.
Yeah, and then you got
then you have a movement off of a misguided, taken out of context
ideology.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so, and then once they get into that, they see that they're not making any progress with their life other than just having extreme positions in certain things that they do and say, but they're not winning. They don't have any fulfillment.
Or they end up drinking the Kool-Aid or going to Heaven's Gate and looking for see, that's what we are today. We've come to a point where technology is so prevalent that it allows us to be able to technology has transitioned us and put us into a whole nother mindset, into a whole nother leadership spectrum. Because before, leadership was just in front of the church, or leadership was that you had this number of followers. But now with social media, you could have somebody can get on and overnight have 20, 30, 50,000 followers or views, and that causes a movement or a following that changes the whole scope of things.
Even if they're not learned in that area
Exactly.
of a space that they're operating in, you can be a very novice, but your influence on there, and people pick up on it, and then you grow, and next thing you know, you change your thought position on it.
Well, I'll tell you something more dangerous. You put all your energy and effort in looking like you got it going on.
Ooh.
Mhm.
All right.
And that's what
And
that's
you
what
know
a lot
how
of
to
people
you know
do.
how to put a video together. You know how
Yeah.
to make you know how to shoot
Use
the video.
technology.
So the
To
package
make-
makes you look good.
The
Yeah.
package makes you look good without working on knowing that it's leadership is an
content.
inside job.
Right.
And so you work so hard to look like you belong,
And then
just so you can get in the room. And then when you get in the room, you know
You
what
don't have
happens?
the content
You
to
don't
stay in the
know,
space.
and you don't even
Exactly.
get kicked out of the room.
Mhm.
You shamefully escort yourself out of the room
Ooh.
because you know you don't belong.
Wow.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
what happens more times. You don't get kicked out of the room. You just realize that you are out of your element. I don't belong here. I'm uncomfortable.
And I'm going to sneak out because I don't want nobody to see. You know,
And then what happens? You get in a space where nobody can tell you anything.
Oh,
That's-
that's what
that's-
that's what
that's-
happened with R. Kelly and everything. But see, as a publisher, I get so many people that come to me, and we can package that book. You know, they used to say you can't read a book by its cover. You can't tell a book by its cover. But today, books are determined. Books are purchased by that cover. So if you get somebody like Cedric Raphael, who's one of the best graphic artists on the planet.
Thank you,
I mean,
sir.
this guy is just—he's awesome. You get somebody. He just did a cover for a young man. This book is called "The 10 Things I Wish I Knew Before I Turned 18." This cover is so fire. This cover is so awesome. Just by the cover itself, it's selling hundreds of books. Okay. Fortunately, the content is good. But for so many people that are coming to me, their content is seriously whack.
But let me tell you that's what life is all about, though. Because if we take that same concept of marketing and putting a cover on something that the content is whack, that's what we're doing in real life.
That's exactly
People are
right.
standing up and they looking good and they got their big red leather Bible with a whole briefcase handle on it, and they open it up and they come and they look the part.
And
They got the
even say
vest in the
something
back
right
of the vest, they got the Stacey Adams shoes, and they look saved. But I'm telling you, I've been
Empty
there. I've been there on
inside.
in the ranks of young ministers coming up, and we're sitting in mega churches, and all the ministers sit on front, right? And I can guarantee you 90% of them were not ready to go and minister a word if the call came in right there. They say, you want to be ready and stay ready so you can be ready. I'm telling you, we people are not ready. We got to go in here and get this thing and develop and proactively participate in the evolution of ourselves. But I'm telling you, people don't
proactively participate in the evolution
Listen,
of ourselves.
you sit up here and
That's
pray,
good.
God, I want to do this and that. And God said, I want to do that too. So how are we going to do it? And you be like, just make it happen. Make me over, God. No, wait, I made perfection when I made you. You kind of screwed it up. Now you need to write it. You can't have me reboot you and remake you. The concept of you just being remade overnight don't teach you anything. The Christian walk, boy, y'all done got me fired.
Well,
Let me
that's
calm
part of
down.
Yeah, calm
okay,
down.
calm down.
Yeah,
That's
calm
part
down.
of what
The-
that's part of what the National Men's Prayer Call is all about. Because now we're talking about that personal growth element. We're talking about personal
Exactly.
development. We're talking about
Spiritual
using
Tuesday.
We're
Leadership
talking-
on Thursday.
We're talking about having prayer as a mechanism, as a fuel to get you there. But we've got the word. We've got a praise report. We have a mechanism that men are able. See, right now you look at the churches and they're full of women. Now we're not just going. This isn't a bash you time. This is just a transparency time. You go to church, 50, 60, 70, 80% of the participants are female.
I want to piggyback on
Piggyback
that real
on
quick. Have y'all ever heard in church when people say, we're going to usher in the spirit? Come on, let's keep this music. We're going to usher in the spirit.
It better be there when you get there.
Okay, my point. But the church has been teaching that, and we have this thought process that look, God is everywhere already. Guess
the
who's not in the presence of the Spirit?
It's us.
It's us. And so in that same mind frame, you have to participate in getting yourselves there. I don't care when you at home and you're preparing your music and you're getting your praise music, you're in prayer, you're communicating to God. Not only communicating to God, you're listening to God. And you prepare. And so when you get to church, baby boy, you ain't lighting no fire. You already brought your torch in. And you setting somebody else up. And this is what I mean by proactively participating, that we're doing our work. This is foundationally what the National Men's Prayer Call does. Because men come there. They volunteer their time to listen, to pray into it, and say, you know what, today I'm going to be a little bit better. And then I'm going to listen to this word, and I'm going to get some more tools in my tool belt. Because some of us, we can open up that toolbox, and it's one screwdriver. It ain't even the Phillips head. It's just the flat head. And we don't have no tools to make our lives work. And so that's why I'm so encouraged by this. And I'm looking at the topics of saying for male leadership. And when people come through the room, now it don't take you 5 minutes being in the car business. When somebody you interviewing and you start talking shop talk, you can tell within the first couple of 30 seconds that if they got the tools or not.
If they know what they're talking
Now,
about.
here are these women who've been getting some dynamic fire word that they know they've been preparing themselves, that seed has been sown in their heart. And when men get to talking, they're like, well, this boy, I don't know what he's talking about. He ain't rightly dividing his word. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just asking me, and I'm asking myself, being the first one I'm talking to, that I got to get in here and do my work. And then if it's somewhere I'm deficient in, have you ever done this? Now, I've done this on occasion. I go to my wife, I say, you know what? I just want to have a conversation. I'm here to listen. What do you think about me being a husband? Is there anything that I could do better? And so I'm creating an atmosphere so her to be transparent for me. But here's the issue. I don't want to get this wrong no more. I done been there, done that. I want this relationship to be fulfilling to her. And in my role as husband, and my role as father, could you tell me? And she's the closest person on the sidelines watching. So wouldn't she be able to give me some good content where I can? But when the last time have we ever done that? And I'm saying, hey, you know, I love you, and I love you enough to know I ain't perfect. So help me get better for you. I ain't, you know, just trying to be, dynamic husband. I'm trying to be a dynamic husband for you. So help me out.
So I want to push back on that a little bit. All right. You know, and I have a qualified opinion because I'm 35 years married. Mm-hmm. And it hadn't always been easy, but a couple things me and my wife have figured out. One thing we figured out is, and our marriage got better when this revelation came to me, and she and I've discussed this. When I took the responsibility away from her of making me happy. When I took the responsibility away from her for fulfilling me. When I took the responsibility away from her for me feeling a certain kind of way. I had to recognize that if I focus on being the man that God wants me to be, and focus on being fulfilled by Him, and focused on letting Him feed me and letting Him guide me, then spiritually and what He created in her will follow in line. And because as long as I relied upon my fulfillment coming from her, as long as that part of me, she was responsible in any kind of way of making me happy, then I deitized her and I left her in a very dangerous area.
You know that's not what I said at all.
No, hold on. I'm not. Just hear me out. All right, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you said you want to get it right, so you wanted some feedback from her. And all I'm saying is that you already know how to get it right. Mm-hmm. This is my response to your question. You just continue the path that you're on with just being the man that you're supposed to be, and you know what went wrong in the past and what went right, because you reflect to correct. You're a very intelligent guy. You don't really need confirmation from somebody else to tell you if you go
insight.
You don't need that.
I might miss the angle. Now I do, because I'm proactive in that space.
You already know, but I think it's very dangerous to hand people that kind of power to say, hey, I need you to analyze me. Tell me if I'm doing it right. I think that's a very crazy space.
Well, think about that, because we've had that on occasions when you say, hey, you know what, you would do this better because I studied and I got a new perspective from even leading a class. And you say, if you do this and this, from not from a a criticism space, but from a critiquing space. Right, and that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Candor is important in leadership, because candor is not about, and you and I have had this conversation, candor is not about your ability to give input. Candor, the science of candor, is about your ability to receive input and make sure that you are able to manage the emotions that you feel once somebody gives you feedback on the question, especially if you invite them to give you feedback. Now, then we have to control the block.
It could just be a
Well,
response.
and then especially as
reaction.
leaders, we have to make sure that we are careful and not to just volunteer feedback all the time anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
Because feedback can
No
be
doubt.
helpful.
Yeah,
No doubt.
yeah.
And then in that space, I'm saying for this thing, because I'm not perfect. You know, sometimes I do miss it. Come on now. You know, I know it's hard to believe, but I'm just saying. Sometimes I have to go back to the person I trust and say, you know what? Is there a place I can fine tune and make this better, in particular for you, because I am trying to do that. Not that I'm trying to be like a tumbleweed in the wind and getting tossed from here to there, because I'm very solid in the person I am, but I do want to make sure that I'm not missing things. You know what I'm saying? And so that opportunity is there. And it's the difference between...
Well, how about this? How about you, and I'm just suggesting this, all right? I'm just hearing what you're saying. How about you just make sure that the invitation is there in the case in that moment is something is missing. But as far as to go through, have somebody go through a complete analysis,
No,
I think that's
I don't think I'm saying I want you to interpret it that way at all. I'm saying in this.
That's what it sounds like to me.
No,
okay, so let me help me out there.
Now I'm telling you from a man's standpoint, as I'm being a husband and I'm growing to you, that in a very safe and open space that I can come back over here and look for critique to say, hey, you know what, you think there's any focus? And she said, Cleve, you know what I need you to do? You know, I want you to make yourself a little more available for the younger kids. And in that space, because again, from somebody who's an entrepreneur, I'm working all the time.
Right.
So for me to have cutoff dates, which she suggested, said you gotta have cutoff time. After 7 o'clock, your client shouldn't be able to come in because it impedes on our personal space. You work all day, and then at night, the kids need to see you. It would be nice if you go in and say good night.
All night.
Right. It's a good night to go because that's the call that's come. It'd be good for you to go in there and just not me seeing them at night. So it's spaces like that I go in and say, you know what, you're right. I can do that. And in space like that,
So your point is being open to that feedback.
Being open, and then I'm creating the space for it to be. And it ain't had in an anger moment, you don't never come on for the kids, you all you do is work. I'm like, oh, whoa, where'd that come from? Right.
Okay.
So, but that's just the interesting part of how when we segue into this, I know you talked about this love standpoint, I know we're talking about male leadership, and I gotta be able to just say suggest that I can lead by only trusting folks. I'm not trying to be, judged by committee and you tell me to shape me as my man. I'm doing that myself and God is doing that.
Well, let me just say this. I think that the most important word that we can look at is perspective. You see, there are three selves. There's three portions that we're dealing with every day. There's our current self. There's our ideal self. And then there's the alt self. And most of us are caught up in the alt self. The alt self is, you ought to do this. You ought to go to work. You ought to go to church. You ought to pay the bills. You ought to be there for the kids. And so we shape our current self on what we ought to do and what's expected of us. And by doing what's expected of us, we lose sight on the ideal self, who we could be, who we desire to be. And the interesting thing is this, that seniors polled at 65, 75, 85 years old, the thing that they regretted most in life is that they didn't operate more in the ideal self, the self that they wanted to be, to become that entrepreneur, that business person or writer, or what have you. But that instead, they did the alt stuff. Your mama tells you, you ought to go to school, you ought to get a good job, you ought to take care of your family. And so we're so caught up in the alt activities that we lose perspective on the ideal activities. But more importantly, the question is perspective. See, people see you from a different perspective. The perspective, how they see you, is different than how you might see the situation or yourself.
I did a great note to end on. Jesse is getting ready to take us into a break, and we'll go into our final segment for the Commish show. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure as we get ready to wrap this thing up. And I think we come in and we'll discuss over the break what we're going to have for this last segment. So, Jesse, if you do be so kind, sir, to take us in the break.
If
you're ready for some home-style cooking, some real Cajun food, you need to visit Thibodeau's Cajun Cooking, 107 North Cedar Ridge in Duncanville, Texas. Some of the best Cajun food in town. They also have live music as well. Great spot to bring your friends and your family. Thibodeau's Cajun Cooking.